The house was quiet, too quiet. Like the air was holding its breath as she stood by the window, her fingers grazing the edge of the curtain, her heart beating a little too fast for a woman waiting for nothing her husband had left hours ago, his scent still lingering in the hallway, his words still fresh in the kitchen, cold and indifferent and wrapped in 1,000 layers of routine. But it wasn't him. Her thoughts were tied to. It was someone else. Someone who had become a whisper in her veins, a fire in her blood, someone who looked at her like she was more than just a wife, more than just the woman who folded laundry and made dinner and smiled when she wanted to scream. He arrived without knocking. As always, the door creaked just enough to stir her pulse, and there he was, tall, dark eyes stormy, his jaw clenched with restraint and desire. He didn't speak because words would shatter the fragile illusion of innocence they shared, for appearances, for safety, for all the lies they wrapped around themselves like armor. But tonight the tension was different. It was electric. It was hungry. It pulsed in the silence between them. Her breath caught when he took a step closer. His hand brushed hers. Not by accident, not anymore. And in that touch was every confession she could never speak out loud. Every sin she would never admit but would live 1,000 times over if it meant feeling this alive again. His lips hovered near her ear, not touching. Not yet just close enough for her to feel the heat of him, and when he whispered her name like a secret, like a plea, like a promise, she melted into him, her body betraying her vows, her soul igniting with the thrill of the forbidden, and she kissed him with all the guilt she couldn't wash away, all the loneliness she had dressed in smiles, all the ache that had no name until he gave it one. Their hands were everywhere, desperate, unashamed hers, in his hair, his sliding beneath the soft fabric of her blouse like he had every right to explore every inch of her, like he had been waiting forever to taste what was never his to claim. The couch welcomed them, like it had been waiting too. Cushions pushed aside urgency, making time irrelevant. They moved like dancers, like sinners, like lovers who knew this could ruin them, but didn't care. Not when skin met skin, not when she moaned into his mouth, not when he whispered things her husband never even thought to say. And in every kiss was a betrayal. Not just of a man she had promised, forever to, but of the woman she used to be, the one who thought love was duty and loyalty was enough. And in every touch was a confession not of regret, but of need, of aching, of truth, raw and sinful and beautiful in its recklessness. She knew the line had been crossed long ago, but now there was no line, just him and her, and the heat between them. The truth they created with every sigh, every gasp, every forbidden cry that filled the room like thunder in a storm. They never wanted to end. She woke tangled in sheets that still carried his scent, her skin warm from the echoes of his touch, her lips swollen from kisses that didn't belong to her marriage. Her eyes stared at the ceiling like maybe it could answer the questions she couldn't ask. But all it held was silence, and that silence was louder than guilt, louder than shame, louder than the words she never wanted to hear. He was still there in the kitchen, shirtless, eyes dark and heavy with the weight of what they had done. His hand around a coffee cup like he was trying to ground himself in something simple, something clean. But there was nothing clean about what had happened. Nothing pure about the way he had taken her in the quiet chaos of her living room. Nothing innocent about the way she had begged for more with every breathless gasp. She stepped toward him, barefoot heartbeat, quick fingers brushing her hair back, like that would erase the truth from last night. But the truth was inside her now, pulsing alive in every inch of her skin. And when he turned to look at her like she was still the most beautiful disaster he had ever touched, she knew she would let it happen again and again and again. He spoke her name like it hurt him, like it healed him, like it was the only word he knew anymore, and when he reached for her, there was no hesitation, no pretending, no mask, just his hands on her hips, his lips on her collarbone, his voice low and rough and full of craving, as he asked her if she wanted to stop, and she lied with her silence because her body said yes. Her soul screamed yes, and her heart betrayed them both. They didn't make love this time. They consumed, they devoured, they became something raw and dangerous and real, their movements slow and deep and filled with the kind of ache that came from being denied for too long. She scratched his back, he bit, Her shoulder, they whispered things that could never exist outside these walls, and they held each other like this moment was the only truth they had left. And when it was over, when the storm had passed, they lay there tangled again. His hand tracing circles on her bare thigh, her head on his chest, listening to the sound of something breaking inside her, something soft and fragile and necessary. Because now it wasn't just lust, now it wasn't just an escape. Now it was more days past, but they didn't fade. They burned the secret between them, lighting up every glance, every accidental touch, every pause in conversation when her husband asked her what was wrong. And she said nothing with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She saw him everywhere in her dreams, in the mirror, in the spaces between her breaths. And when he called, when he said her name like a prayer or a curse or both, she went to him because she couldn't not, because her heart had already chosen long before her. Body ever did. They met in places that held no memories, places untouched by guilt, hotel rooms with cold sheets and hot nights. The back seat of his car on rainy afternoons, alleys that swallowed their moans and gave nothing back but silence, and she let him take her every time. Like it was the last time, because maybe one day the weight of it all would come crashing down and she would have to choose. But one night she stood by the window again just like that first time, and this time her husband's voice was soft, not cruel, not distant, just tired and sad. And she realized he knew maybe not everything, but enough to feel the space between them, the space she had filled with another man's name. He didn't ask. He didn't shout. He just turned away, and that broke her more than anger ever could. So she drove through the night, through the ache, through the memory of every kiss, every touch, every whispered sin. And when she reached him, she stood in the doorway. And she cried not because she regretted him, but because she didn't, because she wanted to stay, and that made her the worst kind of woman. But he pulled her into his arms without a word and kissed her like it was the first time, like it was the last time. And in that kiss was everything they had never said and everything they had ever felt. And she knew she couldn't live in the in-between anymore. So she left the house that wasn't home anymore, left the man who had stopped seeing her. Long before she disappeared, left the version of herself that waited and hoped and stayed quiet. And instead, she chose the fire, the chaos, the man who made her feel too much, too deeply, too dangerously. And maybe it would end in ruin. Maybe it would tear them apart. Maybe love born of betrayal could never last. But as he lifted her into his arms again, as he laid her down and undressed her with hands that worshipped not claimed, as he kissed her with the hunger of 1,000 lonely nights and touched her like she was salvation, not sin, she knew this was her ending, and it was worth every fall.